Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the Rogue Deck Chronicles. I am Dean, and once again, I have Devin with me.
Hey everybody. Hopefully everyone had a good weekend and is recovering from probably the biggest Pokemon Day presentation we've had in quite a while.
Yeah, and just think about it, this is only the 29th year. Just wait for next year when it's the 30th anniversary of Pokemon.
They made a big deal for 20 and 25, so they're for sure going to make a big deal next year. But I think right now what they gave us during that Pokemon Presents is going to keep everyone happy for a very long time.
Oh, absolutely. We got a lot of good news. And for those who play Sleep, Masters EX, Unite, everyone got something with everything Pokemon. They're bringing in a new game, Pokemon Champions. So I'm
Yes.
excited to see that battle simulator type game come out. Maybe it'll get me into more VGC. I normally don't touch it, so maybe this will be a nice introduction for me as someone that is on the semi-competitive side for Pokemon. What do you think about it? You play the video game more than me.
So from my initial reaction to everything and some of the stuff I read after the fact, they will have a casual ladder, they will have a ranked ladder. It's really almost in tune to what Pokemon Showdown is for those who do Pokemon battling online. Showdown is an online platform that is not official by any means, but allows you to play around in different formats and
Hmm.
allows you to battle without having to go through the motions of like breeding and doing all that in the physical Switch games. You can do it online, like kind of like theory build and stuff. I think it's going to be that but come to life. So I'm excited to see what it is. There's been jokes of it's all fun and games until you get the primal Groudon that can Dynamax Water Spout with a Z move or something. It's like they're gonna throw all the different mechanics that we've had over the last 7 8 years into one Pokemon or one match and then see what it is. It's almost like Ash during the anime. He was able to do all the mechanics because he can. Everyone's gonna
Yeah,
get hero armor for that.
yeah. Because if in the trailer you see the Terra or the Terrasilites and Zozo versus the Mega Charizard, and then there was another like other like then Aegislash was in there, which is not in Sword or not in Scarlet Violet. So it's nice. It's a good way to bring everything together because we're still missing Pokemon on the Switch living decks.
Yes, we
So
are.
unless you had home,
I know that
unless
list by heart because I'm trying to shiny hunt every single one of those and go right now.
yeah, so we're hoping that this will kind of bring everything together before we make the transition to the Switch 2. So we're excited about that. But a couple of TCG news. So before we get into the big news, they introduced a new set for Pokemon Pocket, and if I'm not mistaken, I heard they're bringing a rank ladder to the game as well.
They will bring a rank ladder at the end of March. They kind of they did throw it in at it like so every game kind of got like its major announcement and then they did like the little legal disclaimers at the end. And when they did Pocket, they just flashed the we're gonna have ranked on the screen for like not even 5 seconds and then went on to the next video. It's like whoa. You just gave us a mini set of 75 cards, showcased Arceus, and just said, "Okay, by the way, you're going to have a ranked ladder soon." It's like you buried the lead there, Pokemon. I see you.
Yeah, and then I've been kind of looking at the meta developed for Pocket since Pokemon Day, and it's only been a couple days for us.
Hmm.
And there's a certain deck that's made a big impact.
There's a certain card has made a big impact, and there's a whole bunch of decks that just do different types of that card.
You mean it's like Arceus, but like not the Pocket version?
Yeah, pretty
Like
much.
that's what Arceus V Star did when it first came out, and you saw all the partners with it. And now we,
well,
we see it in Pocket.
Well, I mean, they made the whole idea of this pocket set to be linked to Arceus, and there's a lot of Pokemon with different link abilities that allow you to do different things if you have an Arceus in play. And they really made it where you had to be dependent on Arceus depending on the Pokemon. Like, I
Hmm.
am. I'm playing around and building a Dialga Arceus deck right now that I'm kind of wanting to see how that flows because I really like my Dialga Mega deck that does something very similar. But I'm also very interested in Arceus, Crobat, and then the most common partner for that is Darkrai, but I don't have a Darkrai in my account yet, so I'm trying to figure out what I can substitute that Darkrai for. And it's basically just you're pinging damage every turn and then just attacking the cleanup. It's bonkers. But that's the meta right now. It's been out for not even a week, and there's been so many new archetypes already created. So I'm excited to talk about that in the future.
Yeah, I know we'll have a future episode with that coming up. I know one of the first packs that opened with the is a Triumphant Light.
Yes.
So one of the first cards I saw was the Probopass EX, and I saw I'm like, oh, you can like take I think it was like 20 less damage, and then the next pack I opened was an Adamant and take another 20 less. I'm like, oh, maybe I can do something with this metal deck. Like finally metal's getting some support, but I know in this it may be too slow to set up, or I don't know. I haven't really touched it. It was just
With
more
Dialga, Metal's never too slow. Like Metal got a lot of support in the last two. Like this whole Sinnoh based these sets that are based around Sinnoh, Metal got a lot of support it needed. So it's very interesting to see how Metal is going to creep into the top half of the meta. Like I said, I've been playing Dialga Mega, and it's been so much fun because Dialga can just set anything up.
Yeah. So that's the pocket news, and for once they didn't leave TCG out. Like as soon as they started talking about the trading card game, I'm like, we already have our announcement. We know the couple sets coming out. We got the Ethan cards. We got the Steven cards. And all of a sudden, they made the 2-card announcement.
Yeah, I was so wrong. I thought they were going to just ignore TCG, no big deal, and then they did this, and I think TCG got the most screen time that wasn't the ZA announcement.
Yeah, I think they finally, or not finally, I think they realized like we are a big portion of the competitive scene, and even outside the competitive realm, like collectors and just casual people that play the trading card game, like we're such a big like facet of the company. It's nice that we got the screen time, at least just any time at that. Like we usually don't get anything because we usually get our stuff periodically, so there's really no need for the trading card game components to be indirect. Like save it for the big announcements and the games and those that don't necessarily get the updates like we do. So it's really cool to see that. Before we talk about the 2 cards, I think another thing to really touch on is that they're bringing language support with all the new games and with ZA to the Latin American countries. So I
Yes.
thought that was really cool.
Yeah, regionalized Spanish is a big deal. I think that a lot of people were initially asking the question, "What's the difference?" And there's a big difference between like Latin American Spanish and European Spanish.
Mm-hmm.
Heck, even within Spain, there's regional differences between most of the country and then Catalonia and different things like that. So the fact that they recognized that the Latin American countries, one, are a big component of their player base for all games, and then two, made an entire office in Mexico City just so they can get localized Spanish correct, and they wanted to make sure that the dubs and everything like that was accurate. Just shows how much the company has grown and the game has grown globally.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you and anyone really wants to see the past histories of dubs and translations, go on YouTube and try and look up how Pokemon used to localize languages. And it's very interesting to hear the stories of early translators for some of the games and how they had some creative freedom, but they couldn't at the same time. And now Pokemon is like, all right, we're going to have an entire division just for this. So it's
Mm-hmm.
very good to see that growth within the Pokemon Company. Some people say it's about time, and I fully do agree. It's the fact that there's a large portion of the player base that was not neglected. Spanish was still in the game, but it's not their language. It's not how they speak. So
Yeah,
doing that for them is big.
yeah. Like obviously, they were understanding what was going on. So when you start a game and you pick Spanish, even though it wasn't the Spanish that they speak, they knew what was going on.
Yeah.
It's kind of like comparing like American English to like Australian English to British English. Like we can understand each other, but we have some dialects, we have some phrasings that are completely unknown to the other
Yeah.
set of English speakers. Like even like where you and me are from, like we're we're from Canada, and even where we live is a whole different set of speaking in that part of Canada than the rest of the country, including the United States.
Mm-hmm.
So not to that extent, but every region has its own way of speaking, and I like how Pokemon is recognizing that and slowly taking the steps to really represent these nations and their cultures and say, yes, we want you to play our game and we want you to be comfortable when you play our game.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought it was really, really good that they prioritized it over the last year. You can tell they've been prioritizing it for years because what they were also talking about in that same release was how impactful that was for the trading card game.
Yeah.
And that they were so happy that the trading card game was getting localized translations.
And it's interesting too, because even the very top players are from Latin America.
Mm-hmm.
Like you got that the Portuguese Brazilian group that's coming out of nowhere and just bringing the best Charizard decks and doing amazing at all these tournaments. Our last world champions from Latin America. One of the commentators is from Mexico. Like that part of the world is getting so much representation. So it's about time that they're finally getting cards and a game that is specifically geared towards them.
Yeah.
And it's refreshing, and I like how Pokemon's going in that direction and seeing how other countries are allowing the game in too. Because I know we had the what's going on with China. They finally let Pokemon in, and they have a whole different format than we do, and it's really interesting seeing the international connections and the international relations of this game to everyone else.
Yeah, no, it absolutely is a global game, and they're becoming a global company playing a global game, so they have to adapt accordingly. And they're doing, I think they're doing everything the right way.
Yeah, absolutely. So, with that, we said that Pokemon cards are coming into more languages. Well, let's talk about some pretty big Pokemon cards that were released on Pokemon Day.
Yes, like I would say, short of the starters being revealed in the ZA trailer, I think this was the biggest announcement in the entire thing.
Oh yeah, it's from someone that did not play the this mechanic, as I am a not newer player, but I started in Sun and Moon, so this wasn't a thing. And they brought back Mega Pokemon.
Yes, and it is so interesting. I mean, it makes sense, right? ZA is based off Kalos, which is where Mega Evolution was introduced. That mechanic was from that generation, so it makes sense we are
Mhm.
getting it. It was everyone. I think a lot of players are just shocked for getting it so soon.
Yeah, I was one of those players. I'm like,
I was like,
the
that was going
gameplay
to be a
isn't out
2020.
yet.
I could have sworn that was going to be 2026 announcement at Worlds, or even
Yeah,
at Worlds later this year, saying coming in early 2026. But it's coming now. I think we're going to have Mega cards before Worlds.
I think people were saying we may have this before the end of the year.
Oh, easy, yeah, for sure before the end of the year. But let's go back a little bit. Let's talk about the Mega mechanic a little bit. So the
Hmm.
first thing I want to do is talk about the old Mega mechanic, because they brought back the Mega Pokemon, but it's not the same Mega. The mechanics are very different this time. The only thing that's the same is the fact they both say Mega on the cards.
Hmm.
Everything else is different. So the old Mega mechanic was during the XY block, and they were basic EX Pokemon that got a special evolution. So with that, I'm going to read what an old Mega card said in terms of its rule box to kind of show, and we'll talk about what the new rule box will say in a minute. So the Mega Evolution rule was whenever one of your Pokemon became a Mega Evolution Pokemon, your turn ended. So if you wanted a Mega Evolve, you were going to end your turn after that Mega Evolution would happen. It wasn't that you can't attack. It's your turn automatically ended after that action. And, I mean, for good reason. These Mega Pokemon were strong. They dominated the meta. Like, Mega Rayquaza was a meta-defining deck for a very long time. Primal Groudon, meta-defining deck for a very long time. These Megas were strong. Mega Audino won the World Championship.
Yeah.
So these Megas were good. And the piece that balanced it out was you ended your turn. Now, there were item cards, or well, now tool cards, that were called Spirit Links that you would have to attach to your basic EX Pokemon before you Mega Evolved it, which would bypass the Mega rule. But you were attaching your only tool to that Pokemon for the game, right? That Pokemon had that tool card attached to it for the rest of the game.
So back then, was there no way of getting tools off a Pokemon? Like
Off your own Pokemon, very hard.
Okay, because I know right now, like we have Lost Vacuum, we can choose whether stadium or tool our stadium or the opponent's stadium or vice versa. And I know Field Blower was a card, but I didn't know when that came out.
Field Blower came out to the tail end of the Mega life cycle.
Okay.
But Field Blower was your opponent's tools. It wasn't yours. You couldn't Field Blower your own tool because there was no real card that would allow you to take away your own tool.
So that's interesting. You have to be very precise of when you attach a tool and like know that that's going to be there on the life of the card.
Now, a lot of the Mega Pokemon didn't really need tool cards, to be 100% honest with you. And there were some decks that were more than okay of losing a turn. Like with Primal Groudon, you would just evolve because Primal Groudon needed 4 energy, and by the time you Mega Evolve, you didn't have all your energy yet. So you don't mind sacrificing your turn because you're going to do everything, and then the last thing you do is pop an evolution and pass anyway. Primal Groudon did play its Spirit Link, just for the record. Mega Rayquaza, there was some decks that you just Mega Rayquaza and just Mega Evolve turn 1 because I had a Delta trait. So there were decks that didn't mind losing its turn because you would sequence everything else and be like, all right, I'm going to attack next turn anyway. So there were decks that did not mind it. And there were decks where you kind of needed it because you needed to attack the turn you were evolving because that's just what you needed to do. But it isn't... Again, the cards didn't need other tool cards. The Spirit Links were a necessary evil. You built the deck in consistency for that reasoning, and you just did your thing. You weren't trying to amplify your damage because they're already doing enough damage as they are. You weren't trying to do any add-ons. It was just really, really strong.
Okay. So we talked a little bit about what Megas were back in the good old days. So let's compare them to these cards that we got on Thursday. So
yeah.
So what are the big differences? I know you're making a big you're talking a lot about when you evolve, your turn ends.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking at these cards. I'm not seeing that text on these cards.
No, the rule box for the new Megas is different. So the rule box for the new Megas are the Mega Evolution EX rule says when your Mega Evolution Pokemon is knocked out, your opponent takes 3 prizes. So what they changed the rule box was they just made it more prizes. We're back to an era in a meta of 3 prizers. Like basically, these new Mega Pokemon are old Megas plus tag teams merged into one. Because we have the 3 prize attackers. We have very high HP attackers. Like we're talking 300 plus HP on each one of these. 340 and 360 on both of these. And I only imagine what more HP Pokemon we're going to get. So we're talking over 300 HP, 3 prizes. I think that trade-off is fair because you have to do a lot of damage to get it. Now, a lot of players have already started complaining like, "Oh, we're back to the tag team meta," and they're not wrong. You're gonna have to take 8 prizes in some matches. It's just what you have to do. And I
Mm-hmm.
think players are going to struggle with that being a thing. But megas are also an evolution, like a true evolution, compared to a
Yeah.
mega evolution.
Yeah. So with this, um, Lucario evolves from Riolu, and then the Mega Gardevoir evolves from Kirlia. It's not like when with the old Megas, it's a Gardevoir evolves to Mega Gardevoir. You're actually evolving from the stage 1 to the stage 2, and vice versa, the basic to the stage 1 for the Lucario. So
And
that's
these are
interesting too.
considered,
So
and they're considered stage 1 and stage 2 evolutions, where the old mega was considered a mega evolution, so it was own type of evolution, almost like how breaks weren't considered a stage; they were just considered a break evolution. Megas were just considered a mega evolution. They weren't a stage 1; they were a mega. So anything that involved stage 1 cards did not apply to them. Now, with these new megas, anything that has to do with devolution will affect these cards for sure.
yeah,
So that's a big difference because there's a lot of de-evolution cards and strategies in the format right now that will affect these cards.
and I think another thing to note is cards like Capture and Aroma, where flips heads you get stage 1, flip tails you get a basic. This applies. Like
Mm-hmm.
Mega Lucario is a stage 1, so you can grab that Lucario if you get heads.
Yes.
Versus like if you're talking about, I think a good example is V and V Max or V and V Stars. V
Mm-hmm.
Stars and V Maxes are not considered stage 1. They're their own thing.
Yep.
So you can never you can play Capture Roma. If you flip heads, you can't grab a V Max or a V Star. It doesn't qualify. So I think having the stage 1, stage 2 tag on there is very important when it comes to deck building. So speaking of deck building, how you see these cards fitting in to the format? Granted, we know nothing about the format that they're going to be in. We're just speculating here,
Mm-hmm.
but knowing it's going to be post rotation, what do you see these decks being their own archetype, or do you think they're going to accompany other decks?
I think Gardevoir just got insanely strong. Like I think the Gardevoir, like the Gardevoir we know right now,
Mm-hmm.
is just going to add a Mega Gardevoir into their deck. I don't think it's Mega Gardevoir. I think it's going to be Gardevoir, and you're going to throw in a one of Mega because it evolves from the same character. There is no reason not to just throw in a Mega Gardevoir into that deck.
Yeah, and looking at the attacks for the Gardevoir, which we didn't talk about, so this is a great opportunity. So Gardevoir has 2 attacks. It has both are for 1 psychic energy.
Mm-hmm.
First one is overflowing wishes. I believe that's going to be the translation. For each of your bench Pokemon, search your deck for a basic psychic energy card and attach it to that Pokemon. Then shuffle your deck. But I think it's the second attack that's really going to make this deck over the top. And it's
Yeah,
Mega Symphonia. It's 50 times. This attack is 50 damage for each psychic energy attached to all your Pokemon.
yeah, yeah,
So
and
I think you're
that's
on the right track with Gardevoir just got even better.
and this is not a new attack for Mega Gardevoir. So the original Mega Gardevoir had an attack called Brilliant Arrow, which was for the original Mega Gardevoir. Mega Gardevoir ended up having 2 Megas, by the way. The original Mega Gardevoir was a fairy type Pokemon that had this Brilliant Arrow attack. Was a fairy double color, so 30 times and 30 times the amount of fairy energy attached to all your Pokemon.
Hmm.
So Mega Gardevoir was paired with Xerneas back in the day because Xerneas would Geomancy a whole bunch of fairy energy onto the board. You would Mega up your Gardevoir, have the energy, and you're just doing 210, 240, 270 very easily in a format where anything more than 240 is just overkill back in the day. because the
Yeah.
HBs were scaled very differently. Like when we talk about big HBs, Mega Gardevoir EX, the original Mega Gardevoir, had 210 HB. I think the Primal Groudon had like I'm curious what the Primal Groudon had. I'm gonna look that up real quick. And
Yeah,
that
but
Primal Groudon had one of the more higher HBs.
even then, like 210 was considered big back then.
Mm-hmm.
Now we're like, oh, that's a low level EX. That's like I'm eating that for dinner, depending on what deck you're playing.
Yeah,
Like that's a liability.
Primal Groudon was 240, and that was a
Yeah.
bulky Pokemon back in the day. Now we talked about both of these Pokemon now. Both of these megas, like the new megas, have over 300 HP. So talk about
Mhm.
inflation, power growth, however you want to call it. These HBs got stupidly strong, and they're just bulkier. The three prize tag right there is super justified right there, in my opinion.
Yeah, and really looking at these cards, Gardevoir, this Mega Gardevoir is weak to Dark.
Mm-hmm.
So as of right now, there isn't like a really good Dark Pokemon deck right at the moment. Like yes, we have Ancient Box, but if you say like name a good Dark deck, you can't name one at the moment. So even with having that weakness, pretty it's in a pretty good position. So we talked about the Gardevoir EX. Let's go ahead and look at the Mega Lucario EX.
Yeah.
So this is a
So
stage 1, 340 fighting type Pokemon. Has 2 attacks. The first attack for a fighting energy for 130 is called Aura Jab. Attach up to 3 basic fighting energy cards from your discard pile to your bench Pokemon any way you like. Pretty typical fighting type move. Kind of reminds me of a little bit of Crydon EX, like with that ability, but this one you're actually able to attack with it.
mm-hmm.
And then for 2 fighting energy, Mega Brave for 270, and you just can't attack. You can't use Mega Brave during your next turn. So again, 2 very strong attacks, 270, and then with the Lucario, they actually announced a new trainer card called Premium Power Pro, and that reads during this turn, attacks used by your fighting Pokemon do 30 more damage.
Yeah, like two energy
So
300 is
essentially,
absurd.
yeah,
So I
and
really
that's only
think,
with those 2 modifiers.
yeah, just like that. I really think that Mega Lucario is going to be its own archetype. It's super low to the ground. It doesn't need anything to really partner itself with. I think Lucario in another support Pokemon that's going to enjoy fighting energy would be the thing where I really think you would run like a 3-3 Mega Lucario and then kind of fill the rest of the board up with Pokemon that you would like want to partner it with. And it's only going to get more partners, to be honest with you. Fighting
Yeah.
usually gets a lot of support from the Mega because obviously Mega Lucario is the first Mega Pokemon. That's the whole point of the X and Y story. And I think we're going to get more fighting support with this set over time, where it may not even
Mhm.
need anything else. You might just run a 4/4 Mega Lucario and just call that a deck. It can definitely do its stuff. And it's weak to Psychic. So, I mean, yeah, that kind of sucks. It's weak to Mega Gardevoir, but it can also just smack Gardevoir in the face. So, it's going to be one
Yeah.
of those situations where the weakness is not going to matter.
Oh, I just noticed something.
Hmm.
The that tool card, you can stack it.
Yeah, yeah, it's a damage modifier. It isn't a tool.
Yeah. I didn't realize that. Normally, like, oh, you just do one modifier, but it's an item card, so it's kind of like power, or was it power tablet?
Yeah,
The
you just
modifier in Mew EX
just
or
tap,
Mew
just you
Genius?
just stack a whole bunch of them and go. Yeah, it's exactly that.
Yeah,
So
so you can save it and knock out like you said, we can knock out the Mega Gardevoir. I know there's other archetypes coming soon before this card. That's going to be very bulky too. I'm thinking of the Stevens Metagross,
mhm.
where that will have a lot of HP. The Cynthia's Garchomp is going to have like 400 HP. So the fact that you have all these damage modifiers plays into Lucario's wheelhouse so well.
Honestly, I think Cynthia's Garchomp and Mega Lucario would be a really good deck together since they're both fighting type.
That's true. Yeah, we can see how people innovate with that, but time will tell. We have plenty of time until both those cards are revealed. I know we'll talk about Journeys together in a very upcoming episode, either next week or the week after. So stay tuned for us talking about that and our opinions on post rotation and decks from that new set. But that's a I'm gonna say is there anything else we want to talk about with these cards or the announcement made of Pokemon Day before we go into our next segment?
No, I think the fact that we got Megas is shocking, but I'm more interested to see what other Megas we're going to get and how they're going to be spaced out.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, there's going to be a meta that's going to shift toward these Megas, and the shift's going to be very hard, very quick once they're introduced. So, for those who enjoy single prize decks and enjoy the longer game, enjoy it while you can because I really do believe once Megas get introduced, we're going to see a very aggressive format because
Yeah.
taking 6 prizes in 5 turns is not going to be unheard of.
So one of the Pokemon casters actually tweeted, "Is like, I don't know what y'all are talking about. These games are going to be much shorter, and you're going to see us have our fun games on stream once again."
Yes, yes, that's exactly what it is. They're going to have to figure out how to fill time in between matches because these matches are going to go quick. We're going to transition to a very aggressive, very aggro format once these cards get introduced for sure.
Oh yeah, the beat stick or the beat stick type decks are going to be thriving. I'm thinking of Godango, Raging Bolt, like those that can easily hit this 360. Like yeah, 360 is a big number, but those decks can easily do that even now.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's going to be very aggro, very aggressive. It's going to be hard to be tanky. I'm sure there'll be decks that can do that, but yeah, time, like I said, time will tell. We'll see when these cards are released and how us as players adjust and just figure out what that format will be.
Mm-hmm.
So, speaking about adjusting to how our decks will be with cards and different decisions we want to do based on formats, I think that's a good transition to continuing our How to Train a Rogue series.
Yeah, I think obviously what we're going to be talking about is actually going to be very, very easy to translate when it comes to these new mega decks that are coming in the near future.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so last week we talked about draw support, how you have to have cards to play the game, right? You need to be able to cycle through your hand and give decent hand size and thin your deck. And today we want to stay on supporters because there's other types of supporters that are honestly more important than draw, in my opinion. Like there's times where I don't put a heavy draw support line in my decks because I value these other types of supporters more.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to go through a several categories of other supporters, and each one of these categories could have their own section. But I think just for the point of this series, we kind of just want to group them up together and just give them their little spotlight in this episode and talk about like the importance of these different categories of supporters.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to talk about disruption, recovery, search, and gusting.
Yeah.
So we'll go through what all those mean, and we'll give examples of each one and how we really see it in the current standard format, and maybe some examples of former formats that Devin can give and how they were very beneficial. So first, we're going to talk about disruption cards. So of course, we last week talked about getting the cards in their hand. Well, okay, sometimes you don't want your opponent to have those cards in their hand. We want to get rid of them. So we play certain cards that will limit our opponent's hand size. And a really good example of this is actually the card Judge.
Mm-hmm.
We used to see this a lot in the day. It was a strategy like with Arceus V Star, you get Arceus V Star PAF Judge. That was a common thing. And it's really good if your opponent has a large hand size, like in Dragon Ball EX, Charizard EX, where you have the Rotom V to fill up your hand. There's some decks that just want to have all the resources now so they can use whatever strategy they want at the time. So playing Judge, which reads put put your hand into your deck, shuffle, and draw 4 cards.
Yeah, each player puts their hand to their
Each
deck
player,
and
yeah.
shuffles and draw. Yeah, I think that's a very important piece. Is that this one's an each player thing.
Yeah. So and sometimes like you don't mind having 4 cards because a lot of times you're doing it with 0 or 1 cards in your hand. Sometimes it does hurt, and you just need to get hopefully get a fresh set of cards. But the more important thing is that you're limiting the options to your opponent,
Yeah,
and it's a risk. Like it can limit you too, but when you play the game, you have to do some analysis. Which is more important, limiting what I can do or limiting what my opponent can do?
yeah, and I think other versions of disruption is more than just hand disruption. I think when you talk about disruption, a lot of times people think about control decks and control archetypes
Mm-hmm.
because that's really what it is. Those archetypes aren't really trying to fill their hand up; they're just trying to slow you down. And
Exactly.
it's one of those situations where, like we see with like Snorlax Stall, we see Misfortune Sisters. Look at the top 5 cards of your opponent's deck and discard any number of item cards you find there. Just putting their resources where they can't get them is an important piece. Um, the delinquent back in the day was so strong in control archetypes that they just ended up banning it. Like there's these disruption supporters are very very strong in the right hands, and sometimes you just have to put 1 or 2 in your deck just to make sure that you can just, like you said, sometimes you don't need to make sure you're going fine. You just need to make sure your opponent just gets pushed off track just a little bit.
Exactly. And when it comes to supporters, they can make or break a game at a moment's notice.
I mean, there's a reason why they back in the day these supporters were play as many as you wanted because they were just trainer cards. Now they're once a turn, and
Yeah.
that there's a reason why for that. They are that strong. So
Yeah. I remember playing the base set format with my buddy with Joe, who's been on this podcast before, and he kept on playing the Professor's Oak card over and over again, and he went through like 90% of his deck turn 1. We're like, what the heck are you doing?
yeah,
It's
you can
like
do
you're
4
allowed to do
oak,
that.
4 bill, and you go through your entire deck.
Yeah. So when we talked about disruption, getting your opponent off track, maybe getting you off track a little bit. Another important category of supporter cards is recovery, and we've been seeing this type of card being played more and more in the last coming months, especially with decks like Archaludon, cards with our decks like Charizard EX being the very bulky cards.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you don't want those Pokemon knocked down and giving your opponent free prizes. So you play different supporters to prevent that. So, what are some examples of recovery cards, Devin?
I mean, back in the day, it was Acerola, and when we say recovery, we're not talking about like item recovery specifically. Sometimes it's just recovering your board state to make sure that you are putting your opponent back, putting them back a turn, right? They did
Mm-hmm.
all this work to maybe put a whole bunch of setup damage onto your board, and you're like, nope, nope. So like back in the day, AZ and Acerola were those supporters where you just pick the card
Mm-hmm.
up and put it in your hand, and all that damage just went away.
Yeah, and a good comparison to our standard format is we have cards like Professor Turo's Scenario, you have cards like Penny, and you have cards like Sharon's Care, where depending on the situation, however it reads, you can get certain cards back from in play into your hand and then place them back down and get rid of all that damage. That's why I brought up our Archaludon and Charizard EX. Those are the two main decks we see right now in the current format that really take advantage of Pokemon recovery because they're very bulky Pokemon. Not a lot of Pokemon can one shot these. So even if they're hanging on by a thread, tore it up, um, not penny because they're not basic, but they play these cards and you basically reset your board state,
Mm-hmm.
and now they have to start all over again.
Yeah, I remember in a format, Pokemon Center Lady was a big thing, where yeah, it was only 60 heal, but it healed also all status conditions. So it's like,
Mhm.
all right, you did damage. I'm gonna PCL. I'm gonna potion, do something else. Now all that damage is off the board, and it's like, okay.
And then one card I actually find really, really entertaining. So a couple weeks ago, I was watching one of the content creators I typically watch, and they did a challenge with bulk cards. I
Mm-hmm.
talked about it on the podcast. Me and a couple people at my card shop did a similar but on a much smaller scale. Well, in the video, they found a certain card that is now banned, and it was, I believe, Team Flair's Grunt or something like that.
Oh, Team Flare Grunt, yeah.
So they found that, and in that format, there's no ban cards. It's like you find whatever you can, you put in your deck. So they played it, and what that card does is basically you shuffle your whole entire discard pile back into your deck.
Oh
So
no
it's not.
no 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 no! That's Lysander's trump card.
That's what I'm talking about. Lysander's trump card.
Yeah, Lysander's trump card was banned. I remember when they banned that. Man, that you would have games that would never end.
Yeah. So the reason why I brought that up because I know it's not Pokemon recovery, but it is a recovery.
Oh no, that was the
card for
definition of like recovery. Like your entire discard pile became your deck, and you just did that 5 to 6 times because you run like one or two of in your deck, and you're in 4 VS Seeker, so you can just keep on doing it. And the whole match back then was who runs out of VS Seekers first.
Yeah. So I thought it was very interesting seeing that on in that video, and it's just reminding me of this concept. It's like, yeah, recovery is so important, whether it be your resources or your Pokemon. And I think we can bring that up too with recovery with um your resources as well. There's cards like
Mm-hmm.
Clara from the last format where you can recover either up to 2 energy, 2 Pokemon, or both, and put them into your hand. And that just help you get cards that you need to finish out a game so well. I remember playing Clara in my decks, and then when it rotated, I'm like, this strategy doesn't work anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then also like recovery cards. Like I know this is a card that we don't see often, but like Rourke, where you just get energy from your discard pile and put it in your hand. Sometimes like I think it's one of those you feel more bad playing that supporter because there's better supporters, but that just shows how strong a supporter can be if searching your discard pile for 2 energy card and putting them into your hand is a bad supporter.
Yeah.
Like that just shows the power curve of that type of card. Um, and then obviously we talk about searching from the discard pile. Let's talk about cards that can search from your deck. Like you like to
Yeah.
use the term cherry pick. These supporters, you just go into your deck and get exactly what you need. There's the only condition is the fact you're using your supporter for it, right?
Exactly. And there's a lot of those cards that are very, very important in our format right now. 3 cards we want to highlight that is a good example that you will see a lot of play is right now Irida before it rotates.
Mm-hmm.
Irida is good if you're playing with water Pokemon because you can search your deck for a water Pokemon and also get a tool card.
No, an item card.
So, or sorry, yeah, item card. So you can get whatever Pokemon you're missing that you need on your bench, and then grab an item that can help you set up. And it can be an A spec. So, okay, your Pokemon got knocked out last turn. Get your water Pokemon and get our unfair stamp. Boom, you're back into the game. I know I built a deck with Heatran Metang. I have 4 Iridas in that deck. Well, why do I play 4 Iridas? It's a metal deck. Well, I play the Basque Legion and I play Radiant Greninja, water Pokemon, and those are very important to my strategy. So to be able to get those cards when I need it, and then get something else to help with my strategy and get my board state further along. That's just very important and very, it's just crucial to when you play the game.
Mm-hmm. And another card that we see a lot, and yeah, I'm sure if people who watch the channel see, is Arvin. Just
Mm-hmm.
a tool card and an item. Like that is insanely strong. That's your consistency engine right there. Because you Arvin for a all search and then a tool card, and boom, out of nowhere, your turn just explodes. And it's just it's really strong. It doesn't seem strong on paper, but until you really be able to fine tune those executions, these supporter cards are better than draw cards in my opinion. Like when you're able
Absolutely.
to cherry pick 2 cards and turn into 5, like you're doing more than what a professor's research would do at that point.
Yeah, and it's like a lot of times you see the turn one Arvin to get, say, Nest Ball and a TM Evo, and then all of a sudden you're ready to get your stage twos going the next turn.
Mm-hmm.
That is a common strategy in a lot of decks right now. So you see people playing 3, 4 Arvins just so they can pull that off and making sure they can get their board set up by turn two.
Yep,
And
absolutely.
it's just one of those cards that are going to get stronger even pass into post rotation next month.
Mm-hmm. And then the last category we want to talk about is, I mean, a lot of people would argue this is probably one of the strongest categories of supporters and the category that probably wins you the most games, which is gusting.
Absolutely.
And there's always been a supporter gust in format of some form. We know it as Boss's Orders. Other versions of it has been Lysander. A very broken version of it, in my opinion, was Guzma back in the day, where you gusted and switched at the
Hmm.
same time. Um, yes, we have gusting in terms of items, but most of those are conditional gusting or they are coin flip gusting. So with a supporter, there's really no condition other than the fact that it's your supporter for turn, but having a boss end a game, the boss for the win is probably the best feeling in the world.
Yeah, and for those who don't know, gusting just means being able to pick what Pokemon to bring from your opponent's bench into their active spot.
It comes from the
And
card Gust of Wind. That's where the term
okay,
actually comes from. It was a card that was in base set, and Gust of Wind was a trainer card that you can just gust up any card from your opponent's bench into the active. So that's where the term comes from, and it's always been part of Pokemon because it's been there since the base set. It's been there from day one. It just has evolved over time to where it was the more uncontrolled, unconditional ones are supporters, and any conditional gusting has is items, and you have to either flip a coin or something else has to happen for you.
yeah. So I know I've won so many games of just like trying to get the boss up something I can easily KO. And as soon as I do that, the opponent knows, yep, you got it.
I mean, there's a
Um,
lot of times where I played a game, I go, "Do you have the boss in hand?"
oh
And
yeah,
then you just kind of flash your hand. I'm like, "Yeah." I go, "Okay, scoop,"
yep.
because
I remember
everyone knows how strong it can be.
Yeah, I remember at when I played in Charlotte, into day two, I'm playing and my opponent's like, do you have boss in hand? And I'm kind of like, well, I don't want to tell him what's in my hand or what's in my deck. Like, it gives away too much info because this is still game one. I'm like, I don't feel comfortable telling you. And I got that game or shuffling. He was like, I was asking you so we can save time. Granted, it didn't save time. I had him in 20 seconds because he ended his turn. I had it and we went. But now, as I'm maturing and playing, like it's okay to give that info because, yes, time is precious in a best of three scenario at a big tournament.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it's that important. Like as soon as you give them that info, it's like, okay, I'm going to scoop. Let's go on. I need to get in a better situation. And right now we have boss, but yeah, you brought up some really good past cards like Guzma. That is so powerful. And if you play expanded or GLC, you always have that card in your deck no matter what.
Yeah. And on top of that, like we talked about the conditional gusting as well. Like obviously we have Prime Catcher, we have Pokemon Catcher, we have Counter Catcher. Like those are all gusting cards, but again, they're all conditional, but they're all really strong. When I played with my friends and we were just kind of doing it, and you could tell like they're about to end their turn. They did everything, and there would be times where I'm like, I would just grab my Lysander at the time. That it shows how long I've been playing, and I would just flip it and then to put it back in my hand, and the Lysander would just be facing my friend. He goes, "Okay, let's just reshuffle and do another match."
Yep.
Because you just give them the information they need. It's like, look, I'm just gonna Lysander him for the win. Okay, cool, kind of deal.
Yep.
But it, like I said, I think a lot of people would argue gusting supporters are probably the strongest one because they're the most clutch. You need them, and it feels bad when you have your bosses in your hands in the early game and you need them in the late game. With draw support, you can get them whenever you want. Like if you have them early, mid, or late game, they always have the most value. Gusting really has a peak value toward the end of the match, and that's when you want to have them. But that's why you typically run them as lower counts, so you don't get them as often as early. So there is that trade-off when it comes to deck building on your counts. And then that should be the same for all of these categories, right? You want to have the counts that make sense for the strategy you're going toward. For disruption, if you're not running a disruption strategy, maybe you don't run as many, but you run a couple. That way you can just give yourself a comeback mechanic. For recovery and search, if you are super aggro, maybe you want more of those cards. That way you can recover your resources or search for your resources in a different way that isn't draw. And then we talked about the power of Gust, where you probably want one or two of those in your deck. That way you can just get the KO when you need them, regardless of how your board state at the time. So these have very important values. They have very important needs. And your ratio in your deck should reflect your general win column when you are picking these specific supporters when you're building your deck.
Yeah, absolutely. Know what strategy and what win condition you're going for, and pick the appropriate category of supporter you need. If you need draw, don't be afraid to put draw. If you want to keep disrupting your opponent's hand, play cards like Iono, Judge, and different supporters like that. If you're just looking to control what your opponent's doing, then go for the more control center cards like Erica's Invitation, Misfortune Sisters. Know what's in the card pool, and then just build around that. And don't be afraid to experiment and figure out what the counts work for you. I know in a lot of aggro decks, they typically play like 3-4 boss because they get set up so quickly. They can boss up a target before your opponent gets set up and put them back a turn. But some decks like Control or maybe a little more slow setup style decks, you don't want to have that boss in hand, so they tend to go a little lower. So just know what you're trying to go for and just go from there. And don't be afraid to just experiment with different supporters that we have.
Yeah. And then with that being said, I want to transition to the deck of the week. And I think you said I haven't got a chance to play it. The weekend was super busy for me. But you sent me your list of the deck of the week, and I was looking at it, and I'm like, you have a lot of flexibility with your supporters in this deck. And I think some of it, obviously, you can tell straight up that is setup oriented. Some of them is more acceleration kind of piece. Like, again, you're kind of doing different, each card has a role at different stages of the game. So I would love for you to talk about your deck for those watching. We're going to be talking about a Glaceon EX deck that Dean built this week. It's Glaceon, Blissey with an Unfair Stamp. I think is, if you want to say three cards to highlight this deck, I think those are the three you would say, yes, this is like, those are the three cards you want to talk about the most.
Yeah, absolutely. So it is Glaceon EX. That is the evolution that we are focusing on this week. And what Glaceon does, sorry, my computer's not working. Here we go. Glaceon EX. It is a stage 1 water type Pokemon. It is a Tera Pokemon, just like the other evolutions that we've been doing. And it has two attacks. The first attack is Frost Bullet for a water colorless, and it does 110. And then you put 30 damage on your opponent's bench Pokemon. And then the second attack is Euclase.
I don't know. I see these. A lot of these attacks have very weird names. I'll say it that way.
I know I went to school to study environmental science, but geology was not part of my curriculum, and I know all these are based off of different minerals. And yeah, I probably should have took a mineralogy class, but that's not the point. So the attack is for a grass, water, and darkness energy, and knock out one of your opponent's Pokemon that has exactly 6 damage counters on it. So based on that information, you can you can tell that this is all about setting up your opponent's setting up damage on your opponent's board and being able to knock out threats as you see fit.
Mm-hmm.
So the way I do that is I play a 4-3 line of the Glaceon, 2-2 of the Blissey, 2-2 of Bibarel, 2 Munkidoris, and a Fezandipiti. So the Bibarel is just for draw because I don't really play a lot of draw support in this, but I do play enough to get me going. But because of the energy in this deck, I knew it will be difficult to get the energy going by turn 2 without using some setup cards. So I play Glass Trumpet in here, I play Crispin in here, and I just want to be able to get my energy on board and then just manipulate it as I see fit. So with the Frost Bullet doing 30 damage to the bench, I wanted to give myself flexibility to be able to use Munkidori to move 30 damage on my board if I have that, because my plan is I'm going to take a hit and absorb it, move 30 damage, get to the exact 60 damage, and then use the second attack on Glaceon to get the easy 2-prize KO or whatever KO it is.
Mm-hmm.
Ideally 2 prizes, but depends what deck I'm going against.
Yeah.
So, and then with that, I kind of really wanted to focus on disrupting my opponent as much as I can. And I do that by playing Judge, Iono, and then you mentioned it, the Unfair Stamp. Because I'm not doing that much damage and I'm more setting up some later turns, I want to be able to achieve my win condition, but slow my opponent down. So you play Judge to get him down to 4 cards. You play Iono to get him down to however many cards that have prizes left, and then you play the Unfair Stamp because you do get knocked out almost every turn with this deck. And then the 2 stadiums I chose for this, I wanted to help put damage on the board on my opponent's side. So I have 2 Gapejaw Bogs. So Gapejaw Bog reads, whenever either player puts a basic Pokemon from their hand onto their bench, they put 2 damage counters on that Pokemon. So Nest Ball and Buddy-Buddy do go around this,
Mm-hmm.
but the goal is to place this down in the early game. Yes, it's going to impact me as well, but with having that Munkidori, I don't mind that because I can just get that damage off. And then another stadium I wanted to try out, and I actually like this one a lot, is the Calamitous Snowy Mountain. And this reads, whenever any player attaches an energy card from their hand to one of their basic non-water Pokemon, you put 2 damage counters on it. So just ways to get damage onto my opponent's board, and then I can manipulate it however I see fit. So
It makes a
I
lot
learned
of sense of how you're going about it. Like I was really curious about the stadiums, but after you explained the stadiums, it makes a lot more sense. It's just very creative ways for you to get to the 60, I think, is what you're trying to do.
exactly because I didn't want to just rely on the Frost Bullet because I do know a lot of decks do play Munkidori themselves. So, okay, I do 30, but they're going to put that 30 back on me. So I want to be able to do it to where even if the 30 doesn't matter, there's other damage elsewhere, and I can just manipulate it the best way I can. Because remember, with Munkidori, you don't have to do 30 exactly. You can do anywhere from 10 to 30 damage onto the board. So if your opponent only needs 20 more damage to get to the 60, you can move just 20 damage, save that 1 damage, and hopefully it doesn't impact what you can do. And you can save that for your next turn to move damage around.
Gotcha.
So it's trying to utilize the Glaceon's attack as much as possible, and then using the Happy Transfer ability on the Blissey to manipulate my energy on my board best I can, because I do play the Glass Trumpet to get energy on the board and just moving it around. Because sometimes you can utilize the same darkness energy twice, put it on the Munkidori and then move it back on the Glaceon. And then sometimes I'm able to put two Munkidoris in play and I'm able to move a bunch of energy off my board as well. So it's a lot of manipulation on both my board and my opponent's board.
Gotcha. Well, after this episode on Friday at noon, we're going to have a showcase of this deck in action for those who want to see him kind of play around the deck. He's going to talk. Dean will talk through his strategies and everything like that, and kind of showcase what this deck can do against the meta level decks and other decks on the ladder. So definitely keep an eye out on that. What we do is, for those who do not know, is every time we talk about a deck on this episode, the very next day we will do a showcase video of 2 to 3 matches to showcase the strategy and talk about the deck list in more detail. So if you are interested in this archetype and interested in this list, it will be in the show notes. It will be in the description of the video, but it will also have its own video dedicated to it for you guys to see that as well. So with that being said, Dean, is there anything else you want to talk about this deck or anything else you want to showcase?
No, I'm excited for y'all to see how this deck plays out. It's been a long process with this deck, I'm not gonna lie. Because you're not doing a lot of damage, the games are tough. It's a lot of thinking. Reminds me of the Espeon deck that you built last week's, but just on maybe a lighter side of it. So it is a very patient deck, especially in a very aggro format like we are in now.
Yeah.
But it is a fun deck once you are able to pull off your strategy. I remember playing this against a poison Okidogi deck for practice, and I'm like, oh man, like they had 6 cards in hand. I'm like, they got this, and I was able to, I judged them into a hand. I'm like, oh, they have to get this. Like they don't need a lot, and they drew, and I'm waiting, and I'm waiting, and they just pass. And I'm like, oh, I got this. I got game. I moved my damage counters where I needed to get the last 3 prizes, so I was able to do a double knockout. And before I was able to do it, they scooped. So it's fun when you get the strategy off, and that's what I love about doing these decks. But it is definitely testing my patience. I will say that. But
yeah, you were much more of an aggro player than I am. I love long, mid to long games. You were like, is this over yet? Like you are super aggro. Like, and it's interesting because like we talked about last week, like I played a very much of a spread, slow style deck, and this is your turn of really approaching that a little bit, and you're like, yeah, not me. Like our play styles are so different.
Yeah, it's more of the setup. I've been having rough setups because I'll start like maybe with a Chansey, and then I'll draw like 7 energies. So it's the RNG of it too. But it is fun. Once you get your board set up, it's actually very straightforward. It's just you're also kind of you're showing what your opponent what you're doing. So hopefully they just can't play around it.
Yeah.
So
you're telegraphing your plays very much in this deck, and sometimes your opponents can't do anything about it though.
Yeah, and that's what I'm hoping for. So you'll see the videos on Friday. You'll see me talk through and play through my games. I'm excited for that. I have GLC coming up this week at my local shop, so hopefully I can play this week. Missed out last week doing that bulk card challenge with some other people, but I'm excited to play my Turbo Metal GLC deck that I built. Hopefully I can get a badge for once. We've been doing this for a year and a half, and I still haven't gotten a badge there. So we'll see if that happens.
I'll say, do you need me to mail you my GLC deck?
You need to mail me some other stuff too. So
I mean, I can mail you both decks. You just have to switch out the Marshadow. But my deck hasn't changed in like almost 3 years, and all I have to do is replace the Marshadow that got banned.
Well, if I win the metal badge, I may need you to send me that psychic deck anyway. So, but that's me. Well, that's what's coming up for me this week for Pokemon. But yeah, anything else you want to say to our listeners this week, Devin?
No, I mean, I'm excited for Megas to come back. I'm really interested to see how this is going to shape the format. everything that came out from Pokemon Day is going to be really impactful. But talking about both Pocket and TCG, so it's going to be really interesting to see. I know there's tournaments coming up, and there's hype of this rotation just around the corner. So I'm interested to see what's going to happen over the next month or so for sure.
Yeah, so we'll see what the next couple weeks looks like, and I know a lot of my local players are getting ready for post rotation in Atlanta, since that is our local tournament for us, or local regional. But with all that being said, thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Rogue Deck Chronicles, and as always, have fun playing those sneaky decks.
Bye, guys.